This time on Engine Masters, baby shark do 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 do, baby shark do 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 do. What we're gonna do on this episode of Engine Masters is find out how intake manifold plenum volume affects performance. Now, this whole thing was conceived, built, and engineered by our buddy Richard Holdner. You remember him from some past episodes. I think there is no guy I know who is more dedicated to intake manifold science than Richard is. And he follows it a lot, he studies it a lot, and the thing that he has seen is that guys on the internet make some general statements about plenum volume. They'll say things like, oh, if you're gonna run lots of boost or lots of displacement or big RPM, you gotta have bigger plenum volume. And of course, the inverse would be true. Smaller engines, less RPM, less boost, smaller plenum volume. Is that actually true? That's what we're gonna find out. And this is what Richard built for us in order to do that. This is a bone stock GM truck 6.2 liter. It's got a little camshaft in it, aftermarket deal, 227 at 50. That's not a lot of duration. It's a pretty tame camshaft. It's also got headers on it and the Holley high ram intake manifold. And of course, the Holley FI is gonna be controlled by Holley. So this is really rudimentary. And the thing that is gonna shock us is we're gonna hang it on the dyno and it's gonna make like 575 horsepower. And that's with this straight out of the box high ram on it. But the thing you see people do all of the time is like build little spacers between the lid and the runners and adjust plenum volume a little bit. Does it matter? Well, that's what we're gonna find out. We're gonna do it by first running it bone stock, or the intake manifold bone stock, and then we're going ridiculously mega overkill. You'll see what Richard built for us. That's when the episode is gonna get really fun. But first, we're gonna put this on the dyno in as-is configuration and make some pretty stinky power for such a tame engine. So that's the second value you're gonna get out of this episode, is learning what you can do with just junkyard LS power, as if you haven't already seen it. Here we go. You know what the greatest thing is about this episode?
Tell me.
Blame Holdner for everything.
It's all his fault. I
He's
can tell you
not
right
here.
Every
his
time.
idea, his motor, his tune-up. We just get to criticize.
Yeah, every time. Holdner just blows it. He makes mistakes. He leaves out the details. Well, actually, it's pretty good.
It's going to be pretty
I
good.
think it's going to be good.
I'm thinking, where are you going with this? Because I think the whole thing is really cool.
I think so too.
The whole concept here is plenum volume test.
Yeah.
Simple test.
And carburation erased from the picture, which this would be virtually impossible to do with a carburetor. This is the EFI only.
It would have no signal. But Richard Nish took some time and got the Holley all tuned up, so it made it again easy for us. Roll it in, plug it in. Ooh, we get to push the handle and see the results and talk about it.
I'm super curious about this because on a factory Dodge Magnum, they had an intake manifold called the beer barrel, and the guys on the internet say the plenum volume is too big, and they stuff like 2x4s and all kinds of stuff in there with,
2x4s?
spray in place
Not
foam.
even the popsicle stick. They go straight to the 2x4.
I've seen it. I've seen 1x2s, wedged and bolted to the sides of the plenum on tunnel rams and stuffed and changed, and I've seen it too.
So I was working on a highly modified beer barrel intake, and I didn't know whether to believe the internet or believe, that the Chrysler engineers knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
But we will definitively know which direction things go after this test.
Just like we did with the intake runner length test before that you missed out on, we're going to do wild extremes of plenum volume and see what happens. So what we have here is, I guess, just a regular old Holley high ram on a 6.2.
Yeah.
Ready to go.
A little bit of camshaft. Easy.
Okay. Fire it up.
That's a lot of horsepower.
And that is a stout motor for nothing but a cam and intake and headers.
Yeah, that's an LS for you.
Old muscle car stuff is turds compared to LS motors, aren't they?
Except big block Chevys.
Except big block Chevys.
Yeah.
Okay, simple as that. Here's what we've got. 572 horsepower at 7,000 RPM, 476 pound-feet of torque at 5,500, which is really impressive for a stock 6.2 with a cam, arguably an intake manifold that's completely wrong for the combination, and headers.
Do that with your 383 small block
That's
Chevy.
kind of crushing, actually.
I
in a
know,
way.
compared to the dinosaur stuff that we deal with, that's crushing. But what do we know about plenum volume when we deal with carbureted stuff? Typically, the larger the plenum volume, the happier the thing is up at higher RPM, and the larger displacement the engine is, the more plenum volume it likes, yeah?
Are we talking about plenum volume, or are we talking about what a larger plenum does to help the carburetor and where the fuel goes? And that's the question, I think, is part of this thing, is that's why it's fuel injected.
Because it takes that out of the equation.
Yep, so it's just plenum volume.
All right, so this is our baseline for our 6.2 liter with camshaft, intake manifold, and headers, blowing our minds about how much better it is than your typical muscle car V8 by making 572.2 horsepower at 7,000 RPM with, admittedly, a little bit of valve float about to occur, and 476 pound-feet of torque at 5,500 RPM. Now, I would say, and I think Holdner would agree if he was here, in fact, I know he will because I said this to him, that's not the right intake manifold for this particular engine. It's perfect for what we're about to do looking at plenum volume, but that thing is much more high RPM drag racy than what this engine is representing.
Yeah, this compared to a typical style truck manifold or plastic passenger car manifold, this is only going to be better at the very peak of what we're seeing here, and it's really designed more for something that maybe goes 8,000 RPM.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a drag race intake.
So it's unhappy down here, yet still making more power than your typical 383 small block Chevy. Okay, so what we're about to do is introduce the Keglodon. We're all set. Old little itty bitty plenum, gone. And now we're gonna turn this thing into a monster. Thing is, Dulcich has actually shown some legit trepidation about what's about to happen next. Don't go into the water, folks. Wait for this.
Look, any animal that's going to kill you is not anything that I'm going to like very much. That goes for crocodiles, that goes for snakes, adders, and especially sharks, because you don't even see them coming, man. You're in the water, you've got a fear of drowning already, but the last thing you want to do is get pulled down by some beast with really sharp teeth. I don't like sharks.
So there it is, the Keglodon. So this is 100% Richard Holdner's scheme. He wanted to show the biggest possible plenum, most ridiculous test that we could to show what the effect on performance is gonna be. So he's like, what would be giant that we could put on here? Beer keg. And once you have a beer keg, I mean, it's kind of tacky, right? You gotta dress it up. So the Keglodon was born, turning it into a shark in honor of Discovery's Shark Week, which is happening while we're shooting this episode. We got the light up eyeballs, we got the teeth, we got the jaws, we got the fin, we got the dorsal, and up front is the throttle body, which is going to gulp, ingest, dare I say, man-eat the air that's gonna be going into this engine to show you the difference in performance with the regular plenum versus this massive one. It's gonna be great. Got it aligned up here. Got hardware. All right, what are we fishing for here, boys?
Big numbers, right?
Is this gonna be a winner, or will it be the jaws of defeat?
I don't know, but wow.
Oh, here she
I just don't want to see the tail end
Watch
of
out,
a
boy,
bat
she'll
test
chew
here.
you up. So, we gonna need a bigger dyno?
I think we need a higher tack. Because if you read the internet, that much plenum should be good for 16 or 18,000 RPM.
Is that actually what you hear?
I don't know. I mean, when you talk carbureted stuff, I think that guys will tell you it's pretty typical when guys will tell you to add plenum if you're looking for top end peak power.
Oh yes, you
numbers.
have that bigger well to draw on. How many times have you heard that?
And I've heard that from some pretty smart guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And it might be a carburetor thing. I don't know.
Maybe it's like just a big fishtail.
Did you go out there and spend 30 minutes writing things down?
He's
You're just that good?
natural comedic gold
No, I got
coming
it
out.
right there on the hook, man. I'm ready to go. Okay, I have no idea what this is going to do. I have no preconceived notion whatsoever.
This isn't a plenum change. This is a plenum
Massive
change.
We're gonna need a bigger boat. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
No idea what just happened. I don't know. I think this is going to be one where it's not a story of peaks, it's a story of comparing curves.
Now let's take a peek. Wow. Caught myself turning into you.
Turning into me?
I was going to say, let's take a look at the data and see what we can chew on here.
Nothing really happened. Made a little bit less power, basically. That's about it.
Wow, it didn't help, did it?
You would think this radical of a change would
Do something.
would do something.
Right.
Exactly, and it didn't really.
If you actually ran the Keglodon in your drag car, you probably wouldn't feel the difference.
Oh,
Right?
you would. Think of the manliness.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Look at the aerodynamics of
Right.
leading up to the windshield.
Exactly. I think you'd feel it.
I've kind of dismissed it just out of hand for no reason, I guess.
Yeah. No,
I'm surprised that it doesn't show
Surprising to
something good or bad, just a bigger difference.
a bigger difference, yeah.
I guess the Plenum is just not that huge of a deal, is it? In this case.
That starts to bring up a big question, doesn't it?
What's the question?
I mean, how critical is plenum size?
Well, of the types of intake manifold waves, resonances, pulses that you've got going on, the least important is the Helmholtz or the resonance.
Yeah, the Helmholtz resonance.
The Helmholtz resonance
is the weakest.
And I think what we're just seeing is that it doesn't matter that much. You see those guys who run just the plenum spacers that are about an inch tall to change
right.
plenum. Are they really doing anything worthwhile there?
When I've tested them here, they didn't do anything. But I can call 3 engine builders right now that build 1,200, 1,300 horsepower plus engines, normally aspirated, and they will tell you, yes, plenum volume will help the peak number some. So this is a tough one.
My only conclusion that I can make is that plenum volume on an EFI application on a manifold like this is nowhere near as critical as people tend to say that it is.
Well, I think
feel
that's
comfortable saying that.
I would
at
too.
least for this engine combination.
Yeah, I mean, we've just witnessed it.
I mean, we went to extremes here. Part of it was out of fun, but honestly, I think we could go out there and start with a 1-inch spacer, a 2-inch spacer, a 3-inch spacer, and we're not going to see.
Well, clearly not. If we
results.
went,
No,
if
that's
we
what
went
I'm
from
saying.
here to here
We went from A to Z.
and showed virtually zilch and all throughout. Okay,
Okay. You know what?
we're
though?
fish out of water.
Just
I've got a sinking feeling about this whole thing. Really.
Oh my God. I think we all have to appreciate Richard's effort in taking a test of plenum volume and making it this much fun.
It is pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna go actually call Richard and get his take, and then we'll go wrap this thing up.
all right.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Okay, Dulcich, all glory goes to Holdner on this one, but I think the question must be asked, what's the point?
I don't know. My question is, have we finally jumped the shark on Engine Masters? Is this
Winning!
Is this the end here? I don't know.
It's true. Okay, so I actually called Richard and talked this through because, this was his brainchild, and unfortunately he couldn't be here, so we had to come up with the sort of conclusions. And I think he summed it up best, actually, when he said, when it comes to plenum volume on your intake manifold, all generalizations are nonsense. That's a direct quote from Holdner.
Well, here's my takeaway. I've literally obsessed over plenum volume because I've worked on
Really?
some stuff where I was thinking about that Helmholtz resonance and I just wanted to get it right. But now I really don't care about it that much.
Well, and I think that really is the point. intake, resonance, and waves, and ram tuning and everything, it does really matter. The thing is, there are 3 different types of ram tuning waves that are going on there. There's inertial, there's reflective, and then there's the Helmholtz resonance, which is what we tested here.
Right.
Now, the first 2 have a big effect, as we showed when we did the episode about different runner lengths. You want that ram tuning so that when that wave moves its way up the pipe and, comes back down, it's actually sort of supercharging the engine. And Helmholtz resonance in the Plenum can do that, but I think what we just showed is that it is by far the least important of all of these. So when you see guys out there tuning their high ram manifold with like 1-inch spacers and things like that, I think they're stroking themselves.
Well, I don't know. They may be going for little itty bitty little bits of power, but you're not going to go and see gigantic gains with gigantic plenums like this keg.
No. And I think in the radical change that we made here, what it really shows and what Richard was telling me is that Helmholtz tuning of plenum volume is super, super specific to the one engine that you're dealing with and the resonance that it creates. And you can't make a general statement like, oh, it's better if it's bigger for high RPM or if it's better if it's smaller for low RPM. It just doesn't work that way. It's much more specialized than that. And so the bottom line of this episode of Engine Masters is...
You just don't put the Megalodon on any old engine, expect like super duper results, right?
We have truly jumped the shark. All right, find out if that's true as you come back on the next episode of Engine Masters. I really like Jump the Shark. That was awesome.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how I missed that one.
I don't know. It just came to me when I saw the big shark.